Samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So some of you, most of you, know one of the trees around which the Buddha's world and story turns, the Bodhi tree, whose leaves are beautifully shaped like the ending of something, the fullness narrowing to a tip and then to nothing, as kama and craving dissolve. But there's another tree at the center of the Buddha's teaching and life, and it's the rose apple tree. Who here knows about the story of the rose apple tree? Yeah. So the Buddha had, or the Bodhisattva, what the Buddha was before he attained awakening, had been engaging in a series of ascetic self-mortifications, the most, or one of the more common approaches to spiritual practice at his time, where wanderers from various sects would cultivate a spiritual heat called tapas, invoking a burning in the body and spirit that was supposed to dissolve and eliminate old kama, fear of pleasure, distance from body. And the Buddha speaks about his desperate search, devoted search for a final awakening by starving himself, eating one small morsel every day, so that by the end of this period, his belly, he said, he could touch it and feel his backbone through it. And he said that the reflection arose, however painful the ascetics and Brahmins of the past have practiced, however intense their mortification, I have also practiced to that extent. There is no further I can push myself. And then the thought arose, the memory of sitting under a tree, a rose apple tree, when he was a child in the shade, as his father engaged in a plowing ceremony outside. And he said, I slipped then into the first jhana, a state of cool, calm, collectedness of mind. And the thought arose, why am I afraid of that pleasure? And the answer arose, I'm not afraid of that pleasure. And the question arose, is this the path to enlightenment? And the answer arose, this is the path to enlightenment. And he thought it is difficult to practice and calm the body when the body is so tortured. And so he took some rice gruel and sat under the tree and entered into the final night of his awakening, or of before his awakening. And what's so beautiful in that moment is you can hear the echoes of self-constellation and self-conception, subtle motions of ego in his thoughts around his own ascetic practices, however intensely others have practiced, I too have practiced this much. I have gone as far as one can go. The I is very much there. And then this simple coming back to a sweet memory of feeling safe and cool as a child, a coming home. And the insight arising, as so many insights do, without a sense of me. There's no personal pronoun in those invocations, in those insights. The thought arose. Is this the path to enlightenment? The answer arose. This is. The deepest moments we understand something in our lives, so often they come from a place beyond us, below us. And that's such a beautiful motion in the language of the sutta. And it's important to note also that the Buddha had engaged in the past years since his leaving home in rarefied states of formless attainment, the base of nothingness, the base of neither perception nor non-perception. If you don't immediately understand what that means, it's okay. You're not alone. Rarefied states of perception, and yet what he comes to in that moment is the first jhana, which is embodied, cool, in some ways simpler, a homecoming. And also to note that after he had something to eat, the 5 students who had been practicing with him, the 5 ascetics, I knew a monk who kept calling them the 5 aesthetics, and I never knew how to correct him. The 5 ascetics said, Gautama has slipped into a life of luxury and left eating rice gruel. And he had to give up even that motion of ego, even the contempt of his companions in that moment. There's a quote by Paulo Coelho I really love. It says, when you're a child, you know what you want. You know what your path is. And then you forget. But life is kind and it gives you a second chance. And then either you have a choice, either to continue to live the story of another, meaning your parents or your spouses, or to pay the price of living your own dream, your own story. And to know at those key moments first that often the spark of our path does lie in our childhood. You see it glowing in people often in their chittas as children, or maybe you recollect some intimation of it when you were a kid, and then you do forget. And then to note that when the world opens its hand to you again, that there's a price to pay. There's a moment of surrender, of faith. And so the Buddha opened his hand and gave up his pride. And then the night of his awakening, the 3 knowledges arise in tandem through the night. He thinks, I will not get up from this seat until I have attained final awakening, even if only my sinews remain and my blood dries up. The first knowledge that arises is the memories of his past life, his past lives, one after the other. Such was my name, such was my family, such was my pleasure and pain, such was my food, such was my dwelling. Such was my name, such was my clan, such was my food. Such was my name, such was my family, such was my food. Again and again. And you can imagine the expanse of lifetime stretching out behind him, the dispassion which comes from seeing that. How many times does one have to be born before one gets tired of seeing that again and again? Such was my food, such was my name, such was my experience of pleasure and pain. And if you don't believe in past lives, can you look at it in your own life? How many jobs, identities, relationships, births, and deaths do you take every day? Ajahn Nisabho says it's not the monkey becoming sick of the banana, it's us becoming sick of being a monkey. Dispassion, seeing through. And it echoes the Buddha's recollection right before he left home, where he said, "Why do I, subject to birth, seek what is subject to birth? Why do I, subject to sickness, seek what is subject to sickness? Subject to death, seek what is subject to death? Why don't I, seeing the danger in sickness, seeing the danger in being subject to sickness, seek what is free of sickness, of death, of defilement, the unexcelled freedom from the yoke, from bondage, nibbana, awakening? This is the noble search." The Buddha said that suffering can result in either bewilderment or faith, bewilderment or a search. Blessings are mischievous. How many times have we come to the deepest points of crisis in our lives only to find that then we are open suddenly to something else, another glow, an intimation of onward beckoning from the Dhamma, and that's how we come to the path. And so in this moment, the Buddha sees through all that. And then he sees the workings of karma in countless beings passing away and arising. And finally, he says, I saw beyond even the asavas, the defilements, the asava becoming, of sensuality, of ignorance. And just as a person staring at a clear, limpid, mounted pool would see the fish and the stones beneath clearly, even so, I saw clearly the defilements and their ending. And then he sees dependent origination. And this moment of awakening under the Bodhi tree, when people asked the Buddha what he was, are you a man? Are you a god? The Buddha said, I am awake. Buddhasmi. The Buddha means awake. And the other word he used for himself was the tathagata, the thus come or the thus gone. Tata means thus. Agata means come. Gata means gone. So it's a word play. Thus come, thus gone. Transcendence and immanence. Seeing beyond the world and operating perfectly with love in it. The Buddha's primary qualities, the tradition says, were wisdom and compassion for all beings. And when he opened his eyes, and the Brahma Sahampati came to him and uttered those same words which you all spoke in request of the Dhamma talk, there are those with little dust in their eyes, teach the Dhamma for their sake. And the Buddha surveyed the world and saw that there were, and uttered in response, open are the doors to the deathless, let those with ears show their faith. Open are the doors to the deathless, aparuta tesang devara, amata devara. And then, from then on, for 45 years he taught, and everyone tried to understand what he was. So many people would ask him, what is a Tathagata after death? Does it exist, not exist, both exist and not exist, neither exist nor not exist? The tetralemma, which is confusing even to say, let alone answer. And in each case, the Buddha, and it sounds like such an esoteric question, but what they're asking is, what is God? What is the ultimate? What are you once you're no longer your body? You who are enlightened. And the Buddha said, none of this applies. Vacchagotta, who was one of the ones who asked, just as if a candle flame went out, you could not say whether it went north, south, east, or west. It is just reckoned as out. Even so, a Tathagata, whereby which a Tathagata could be reckoned and measured, is cut off at the stump, made like a palmyra root. Deprived of the conditions for further becoming, the Tathagata is deep, immeasurable, like the ocean. And that dialectical tension between him speaking about the enlightened mind, the enlightened heart, as a flame gone out, and yet to avoid us falling into the idea that it is a nihilism, a darkness, him invoking the depth of the ocean for us to understand it is immeasurable and beyond language. He goes to a monk named Vakali once, and he says, Vakali, who's dying, do you have any regrets? And Vakali says, I wish I'd seen you more, Lord. And the Buddha says, what do you care for this body? One who sees the Dhamma sees me, Vakali. One who sees the Dhamma sees me. What would happen if we really understood what that meant? The Buddha is still here. Ajahn, maybe some of you saw his message to all of you. He said, build the monastery in your heart and you will find the Buddha within you. He's right here. And yet to know that even as we touch and resonate with that deep intuition of Dhamma that guides us, and how that becomes visceral, how the Dhamma sometimes speaks to you as a lion in those clear moments that burn in you, giving you intuition, but so often it's you following the faint rustle in the brush, in the trees, the path of a deer, and needing silence to do that. But either way, this clear intuition, a tapping in the chest of your path forward, aligning with the Dhamma, how that becomes the visceral measure of each moment, and how there is a path of purity through this world of karma, of complication, and it leads to awakening. Touching that as you tune yourself and empty yourself of all that is not you, the Stradivarius, its body emptied of all the detriment and detritus, so that the clear note can ring again. The simile of a song resonates throughout the suttas. The Buddha says, one who recollects the Tathagata, their mind is not overcome with hatred, not overcome with delusion. They walk in line with the Dhamma and resonate with the Dhamma, live in harmony with the Dhamma, with open hands, giving freely. Everywhere, this idea of resonating with the Dhamma, and what does that imply but some song or note that you can tune yourself to? Follow that. Come into community where you feel it resonate from others and understand and hear it again at least once every week, below and above the neon buzz of the world that will call your eye and drown your ears. And yet also to know that relating to the Buddha has an abstract resonance doesn't always let us touch him either. To understand that he was human, just like us. After he became awakened, he became something very unique in the world. But even then, to see his humanity, the story of him walking with Venerable Ananda, his attendant, and them coming across a monk on the ground covered in his own excrement and vomit after coming down with dysentery. And they ask the other monks, why is no one taking care of him? And they say, he was a troublesome monk, he has no family. And the Buddha lifts him up along with Venerable Ananda and carries him to a bed, and they clean him together. And the Buddha says, always care for one another. Anyone who cares for the sick cares for me. It's like they care for me. Or the suttas where he's walking through the monastery and sees a monk sewing his robe, gently trying to repair a hole. And he compliments him. He says, that's how you should care for your robes. Something so simple and human. How he had a bad back at the end of his life and would ask Venerable Ananda to teach for him when he could not. There's a sutta called the Humming Sutta, or nicknamed the Humming Sutta. It's one of those gems you don't see unless you look, where a monk is walking through the woods and hears some voice humming or chanting, dependent origination, and the monk looks and it's the Buddha, just reciting dependent origination to himself in the middle of the forest, just humming it to himself. How human. Not in the sense of taking away anything from the Buddha's enlightenment, but can you imagine him? Can you see the Buddha as more than a cold something? How in a world that predicated its entire structure on the caste system, the Buddha constantly push back against it, how he, while strategically, while avoiding the center of Brahminical power in Benares, circled around the kingdoms, around the periphery, and converted almost every kingdom to the path. How in a world where women were completely subject to their husbands and fathers, he took the unprecedented step of giving them not just the validity of being equally as able to attain awakening as any man, but giving them a monastic order. And for those of you who are confused by the whole narrative surrounding the initiation of that, just know there's good reason to question the exact narrative on that in terms of the text, the exact nature of it. How when he founded the Bhikkhuni order for women too, giving them a way out of oppressive marriage, of a life often dedicated or constrained by simply one path, he made an exception for women married young who were 13. Usually they'd only be able to ordain as novices, but for the Bhikkhuni order, he allowed them to take full ordination, in one sense perhaps as a way of helping them escape child marriage as well. This compassion and the lionesses that came out of that. If you have not read the Therigatha and the Therigatha, these verses of the elder monks and nuns, you should. It's one of the first bodies of nature poetry in the world, where the Buddha converted all these aristocratic men, women, princes, princesses, and with classical poetic training, they went and meditated in the mountains and in the forests and spoke of it. There's a story of Suba, an Arahant Bhikkhuni who encounters a very flirtatious bandit in the forest. And he says, "Your eyes are so beautiful. Come, enjoy sensual pleasures. You can make merit later. I'll provide for you." And she says, "I'm really not interested." And he says, "No, it'll be great. You should definitely, your eyes are beautiful." And she says, "If you like my eyes," and she plucks out one of her eyes and gives it to him. And if that doesn't kill the mood, and he bows to her, understanding what he's just done. What a story. And yet what a gift. To understand what the Buddha gave us. And what he was before he became awakened. He talks about his past lives sometimes. And in one, he's a Brahmin with a friend named Gatikara who's very virtuous. And Gatikara hears that a previous Buddha, is coming through. In the Buddhist cosmology, there have been previous awakened beings. And Gatikara tries to invite the Buddha, the former Buddha, to come. He says, "Come, there's a Buddha. It's rare to see a Buddha, an awakened being in the world." And the Buddha is not, the Bodhisattva, the Buddha to be, is not interested. He refuses. He says, "Why would I want to go see such bald-pated ascetics?" But Gatikara knows, this is important. And he eventually drags the Buddha to be by the hair to get him to go. And he's lower caste, and the Buddha realizes in that moment, which is, a capital offense. And he realizes in that moment, if Gatikara, my friend, is willing to risk his life, then this must be special. And he goes and ordains, gains faith. And to understand, he was not different than us. He was not, in these previous incarnations in his childhood, so different. How many of us in our past, or how many friends do you have you meet in the street where you try to explain these teachings of what you found, and it falls on deaf ears? There's not interest. And the Buddha was like that too. I don't know if any of you were dragged by your hair here, but was the Buddha so different than us? The story of growing up, he wasn't, much of that is commentarial. Him sneaking out in the middle of the night, that's only commentarial. What it says is he spoke to his parents, and with tearful faces, they lamented his going, but he left anyways, knowing the importance of his choice after making sure his wife and child were cared for. And yes, it sounds extreme, obviously leaving a wife, a child. And I think for most, that would not be the right decision. We've had people try to ordain with that situation, and almost never, I've actually never seen it be the right choice if their child is not yet grown. But with the Buddha, the scope of what he was trying to do for the world and the magnitude of that choice necessitated great acts too. And the fact that he returned, ordained his child Rahula, ushered him into full awakening, did the same with his stepmother, established his father in enlightenment as well. The Buddha gave the greatest gift to his family he could possibly have given. And there's a poem that Hung Sher wrote about that moment that I wanted to read. I wrote it on the back of a New Yorker cartoon, and then I tried to cover it up by putting another one on top of it. Prince Siddhartha had a wife. He loved her like he loved life. She was fine, she was fair. When he said goodbye, he said to her, Yasodhara, look where life leads. Yasodhara, I'm going to try to get free. I took a little trip into town. I learned that death will cut us down. I woke up by the city wall. Freedom to die is no freedom at all. Like you, I never heard an old man sigh. I never knew that people die. Like you, I never heard a sick man moan. Today, I learned this body is not my home. Yasodhara, death is haunting me. Yasodhara, love won't set us free. Then I saw another man who walked in robes with bowl in hand. His gaze looked neither left nor right. His brow was clear, his eyes were bright. I asked him what he did all day. He said, I cultivate the way. I watched my mind, I watched my breath. And it is the end of birth and death. Yasodhara, I couldn't love you more. Yasodhara, that's why I'm walking out the door. Some will say that I'm a fool. Some will say that I'm too cruel. This is the best thing I can do. When I get free, I'll come back for you. Yasodhara, look where life leads. Yasodhara, I'm going to get free. We interviewed Ajahn Brahmali last Wednesday and asked him what his favorite sutta was, his hidden gem. And he referenced the Chula Hattipadopama Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 27, which features the gradual training, speaking about purifying one's speech, body, livelihood, mindfulness, clear comprehension, concentration, awakening. And Ajahn Brahmali said, it sounds so much like it's something we do. You take on the training, you do it. But what people don't see is the first step in that progression, in that sutta, is a Tathagata arises in the world. A Buddha arises in the world. This whole path is a gift. It has been given to you. And let us carry it on with faith. Let us create a place where it can resonate out. Let us find freedom together.
Handamayam Dhammakataya Sarukaram Dharamase Sadhu 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 Anumodami.
Okay, so we have a chance for Q&A, questions, responses, and we get to hear from Seminary Junha as well. Put her on the spot a little bit. If people want to raise their hands, they may. We'll run a mic over to you. And if you're on Zoom, you can raise your electronic hand as well. Oh, for the people on Zoom, thank you very much.
Yeah, so from the Plum Village, all of the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, I've always learned that what everybody agrees on that the Buddha said is in the Dhammapada. And this is my first, kind of widening that lens, I guess, through this tradition. And I guess I'm just curious, I'm really happy you said take the story about the women ordaining, and hold it lightly. And I did hear another story that made me feel really good about that as well, about why he turned away his stepmother. So I guess my question is, where would you recommend that, there's a lot of really good information you're sharing here, a lot of good dharma and wisdom. And so I guess where would you suggest someone like me who really hasn't been exposed to all of the suttas begin?
The first really good place would be with this great program called Mission Majjhima every Sunday, Bernie. It's a 3-year-long book group. So, but actually, I think there's a anthology by Bhikkhu Bodhi called In the Buddha's Words, which is basically the Bhikkhu Bodhi was the prime translator for the wisdom traditions of all the Nikayas, the main compilations of the Buddha's words and the suttas, and he compiled kind of the key suttas arranged in a format he thought was very accessible in one book called In the Buddha's Words, and that's a very good start. Additionally, online for free, you can find a book by Bhante Nyanamoli called The Life of the Buddha, and that's explicitly framed as the suttas description of the life of the Buddha. So it's like clips from the suttas, excerpts. So you can trust its accuracy, and the commentarial flourishes are distinguished. If you also Google Daily Sutta Newsletter, you can sign up for that. Most monastics I know are signed up for that. You get a free sutta in your email inbox every day. That's worth it. And then for some of these deep dives, because people, don't realize the Buddha taught for 45 years. It's an astounding compilation of teachings, and its internal integrity is astounding, the consistency with which the Buddha taught. People underappreciate that. But also to note that in that you do, this is 2,500 years old, and there are elements which are a little more questionable, others. To do deep dives into certain elements of that takes quite a lot of diving. Bhante Analayo is at the forefront of that, along with Ajahn Nisabho and others. For that, I would talk to a resident monastic or someone. But it's good to know if you come across something that's very jarring in the suttas, you have to learn to hold things a little bit lightly, understanding there are other factors at work. I don't want to shake people's faith. The suttas are astoundingly consistent, and I really place great faith in most of them. And I find it useful to have some room to open the hand a little around certain elements based on that. Would you add anything, Junha? Please. No pressure. Okay, well, good.
We have a question on Zoom.
Question on Zoom? You might be muted.
Sorry, give us just a few moments.
Give us just a few moments.
Okay.
Go for it. Give it one more try. Person on Zoom. What's their name? John?
Trying to unmute.
Oh, we got you.
Oh.
Hey, John.
I'm there. Thank you, Ivan. I have a question about the eternal nature of the Buddha. When you were talking about the Buddha is here within you, and it reminded me so much of sermons when I used to practice Christianity. So many of the qualities and of Christ are similar to the Buddha, and I'm wondering what is the practical difference?
Can I speak first on this one, actually? Thank you, John. I just want to frame that a bit. I think it gets complicated, and I'm uncomfortable saying, actually, clearly that the Buddha is in all of us right now. Rather that when the Buddha says, one who sees the Dhamma sees me, one who sort of awakens, touches the Buddha in that moment and sees him and comes near, and that it's not localized in a person 2,500 years ago. And I think we can walk in line with Dhamma and sense a resonance on that path now in our daily life as well. But I also think it's meaningful to know that each religion has tried to articulate the ultimate, or most have. And at some point you just have to start stacking superlatives on top of another, which goes nowhere. You know, what is each talking about with God or enlightenment? They're just words. And I think the practical difference with Buddhism is, I think the Buddha laid out a path to get there. Because at a certain level, to describe a place we've never been, at some point you just say a mountaintop. But I think a lot of religions are describing a mountaintop that's actually a hill, and they have behind them the Himalayas. Most religions will take you to base camp. Buddhism will take you to the top of Mount Everest. And I'd say the way that, but I think there are ways, and I think there are Christian saints who have attained awakening. And Ajahn Nisabho, one of the famous Western monks, said that if someone was to investigate God to the very end, they would achieve awakening. So what does that mean? And for me, what it means is, you know, the Buddha saw the limits of trying to use language to capture the ultimate because we get attached. And he saw that happen to his teachers. And so he was so precise in giving us what's called apophatic method, via negativa, not trying too hard to describe what you step into when you achieve awakening, but describing all you let go of on the way. And that's a much more reliable thing, because instead of saying, it's super duper good, no, super duper good. It's like, okay, are you still clinging to this? How about this view? Are you attached here? Do you sense any motion of anicca, impermanence? And here's the training in jhana and more that will get you there. And that's the difference, is I think, yeah, the Buddha's path reliably can get there practically, and it gives us praxis, and that is really profound. Junha, please, if I may. Or not. Or sure, okay. You get next question, though. Just a minute. Okay, I'm going to put the mic here, and then Junha can take it when she wants.
So, what is your perspective of in this being a woman in this practice? Can't really evade that one, can you?
Do you want to narrow that at all?
Well, I mean, you know, on some level, women have kind of been cut out. Our bodies are different. And so we're othered. And
Yeah, there's a couple of things that come to mind. There is androcentrism and patriarchy in every religion I've met. Buddhism is not exempt. I'm grateful that when I have touched deeply into the teachings of the Buddha, I have found a path that is welcoming and open to all. And there's also the experience, I guess, that one of the things that's coming to mind is that one of the first times that I was in a bhikkhuni monastery where there was on the shrine, in addition to the central image of the Buddha, there was also images of Kuan Yin and Prajnaparamita, which are both feminine, images of awakening. There was an icon of Mahapajapati. There was a room where the walls were filled with images of female-bodied wisdom, Buddhist teachers, awakened beings throughout time. And I felt that in my body in a way that I didn't know that I hadn't felt that before, but it was so impactful. And what I can say is that it was very unconscious and subconscious, but I think that as long as we're using pronouns for our images of awakening and wisdom and that possibility that are different than the way that we refer to ourselves, that's a chasm. And if we want to be on this path and truly believe that it is a path that is open to us all the way to the end, then we need images that we can relate to. And I think that the reality is that our experience in this world is gendered, and therefore it does matter that we have archetypes and images and language that are inclusive of all genders and all people and all beings. Thank you for the question.
Sorry. You spoke of something that I've heard from time to time in the story of the Buddha and his companion helping a very ill monk, and saying that when you help someone like this, you're helping me. This is 500 years before the religion I was raised in. And in that religion is the story of Christ saying, if you did it for one of these, you've done it for me. And one of the things that opens up for an awareness in me is that what I was raised with, as though it were, and taught as though it were the first time this was ever said, that this comes directly from God. And to realize that some of these words that I was taught in that view, or in that kind of light, these were spoken by the Buddha. I mean, there's something in the story of the wise men who came from the East at his birth. Who were those wise men? What made them so smart? What made them so aware? And I'd like to hear if you have any reflections on that.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, and you know what came up for me, the first thing that came to mind as you were speaking was actually the first time I heard a teacher say, well, you know, the 7 factors of enlightenment are not, you know, did not originate with the Buddha. Like, that's a teaching that predated Buddhism. And being like, what? I thought that was ours, you know? Like, and so, yeah, there is this experience that, well, there is historically the understanding that, or the reality that all of these streams informed each other. And I think that what I find comforting about that is that nobody owns the truth, right? And that it was actually when I went through a phase after I had gotten pretty committed in my Buddhist practice, where I started reading the Christian mystics, which I had never encountered in my earlier life experience in the Christian church. And it was so supportive of my faith in Buddhism to be reading these voices from another tradition that were describing something that was so familiar to me. And this sense that, like, oh, if they're all pointing to the same thing, that seems more likely that it's pointing to something very real and very true than, you know, something that we're claiming as we've got this, you know, and it's just ours. Yeah, I don't know. Ajahn, you want to add?
I think that was the essence of the answer, and just would add, there were strains, I think, making their way to Christianity too, explicitly. There's a church in, I think, Egypt dedicated to a Saint Josaphat, and Saint Josaphat went through all these wild trials with animals, and only later did they realize that it actually is all the stories of the Bodhisattva's life through the Jatakas, and it was actually Saint Bodhisattva. They just didn't realize that it was just the Buddha's past lives kind of reframed as a saint. So I think there was some explicit influence, but I think I've had the same experience with the Christian tradition really resonating deeply when I read. There's a book called The Way of the Pilgrim about a pilgrim wandering through Russia with a backpack full of bread with deep samadhi, and it's an amazing book. If you have Christian relatives, read that with them. It'll bridge the gap. Yeah. There's also a story of a famous Thai Ajahn named Longpo Rusilingdam, who was renowned for his psychic powers, and he writes in his biography about having a really powerful meditation where he found himself in a heaven realm and saw Jesus walking towards him. And he said, Jesus, what are you doing here? Why did you teach what you thought, or what you taught? And Jesus said, oh, I taught rebirth. They changed it. So, which, take it as you will, but I've always liked that story quite a lot. So I do think we have to wrap up.